Okay, so I've just ordered a cab online and hoping it will get me to the right place. Shanlian, here I come.
I'm Ryder. I'm here to dig deeper into a story on an issue I've been working on for close to 20 years, global poverty reduction. And a small village might just hold some important lessons for the whole world. I'm in the eastern part of China on the outskirts of Wuxi City in Jiangsu Province, and the village I'm going to is less than 1% of the size of Beijing. Or, in my home country, half the area of the Dadaab refugee camp in Kenya. The village has a population of over 7,000 people and little over a decade ago was among Jiangsu's poorest, with per capita income of under $4 a day. By 2017, it had more than tripled that per capita income to over $13 a day. By any standards, this is an amazing success story. I want to know its secret and whether there are lessons for elsewhere in the world, in particular Africa. For instance, back in the 60s and 70s, Tanzania created 2,500 ujamaa villages, which had a very, very positive effect on infant mortality and education, but it also crippled industry, infrastructure and became so controversial they had to be overturned. Much later, the Millennium Villages Project, initiated in 2005 by the then UN Secretary-General Kofi Annan and Jeffrey Sachs, was a 10-year, multi-sector rural development programme, operating across 10 sites in 10 African countries with at least 25,000 people in each to achieve the Millennium Development Goals. Trials have shown that these villages had large positive impact effects on agriculture, nutrition, education, child health, HIV and malaria, and sanitation. But ultimately, the improvements in income were insufficient to break the poverty trap. The population in the villages remained poor. So how has Shanlian here in China escaped that trap? A chance conversation with my driver on the way there might just hold the answer.
What's that music, by the way?
It's a theme song of our village called Juhuacun by Biudu.
For those of you that don't speak Chinese, that means Chrysanthemum Village.
Chrysanthemum Village?
Yes, you can listen to it anywhere.
Oh, that's great.
The chrysanthemum flower was introduced to Shanlian by the village chief called Mr. Wu back in 2006.
I hear that the leader of this village, Shanlian, designed this bridge, and it takes us to the chrysanthemum fields, which is even more famous for, so let's go there now. I feel like we've gone back to my home country, Kenya now. We're here in a field with some farmers who are farming a flower called chrysanthemum.
It's a really important cash crop which can be sold fresh. The trouble with cash crops is their prices can fluctuate wildly, and one bad harvest can throw farmers straight back into poverty. I know this from my experience in African countries where they've promoted cash crops but it's failed to solve poverty. So what has China done differently? Importantly, in China, they realised the problem with cash crops is normally you're only growing and selling one product, and that makes you vulnerable. What they've done here is grow another industry at the same time: tourism.
So in the season of autumn, we get huge numbers of tourists who come here to pick the chrysanthemum and also take beautiful pictures.
Indeed, as incomes and inequalities rise across China, internal tourism has become a crucial part of China's poverty reduction strategy. The China National Tourism Administration estimates that the tourism industry will help a whopping 17% of China's poor lift themselves out of poverty by 2020. Here in Shanlian, 1 million visitors were recorded last year. But once the village has attracted the tourists, the question is, how do you make the most out of them? One way is feeding them.
So the idea is that tourists will come here and pick their vegetables to eat for lunch. They're all organically grown. Back in 2009, a graduate official, Zhu Hong, introduced the first of these rural restaurants.
And now there are 35 in Shanlian, but they aren't stopping at rural restaurants.
Here we are at Shanlian's newest tourist attraction. It's the black-topped boat, and it's been open since April this year. Here's my driver.
Hello.
Well, this should be what the boats look like in the middle of autumn and spring, the busiest times here in Shanlian for tourists. And the tourists come from Shanghai and Suzhou, nearby cities, people coming here for a weekend, trying to get away, trying to relax, and it's perfect, beautiful and tranquil.
But as I've discovered from Mr. Ye, Shanlian's deputy village chief, is not only integrating agriculture and tourism, it's doing much more.
山莲黄菊花茶，清淡明目，清热去火，降火降血压，助睡眠。菊花饭，纯植物饮料，再来能喝到爽。我们还有菊花麦汤、菊花啤酒、菊花黄酒、菊花撞片、菊花软面、菊花整个、菊花胶团、菊花面膜、菊花精油。食用菊花有点甜，菊花沙拉、菊花火锅、菊花混的、菊花冰淇淋、菊花焖蛋、菊花饺、菊花蛋糕、菊花醋、菊花饼干、菊花奶昔、菊花三文鱼，一桌菜都是菊花。
Now, what Mr. Ye just gave us was a traditional Chinese comedic rap, but there's a serious point behind it. What
Shanlian Village is doing is making sure their strategy for poverty reduction doesn't just rely on one or even two industries. It doesn't just rely on demand for flowers. It doesn't just rely on tourism. By processing the chrysanthemum and making a whole range of products, they're diversifying all the possible ways they can make money from the crop. That's a lesson I feel others in African countries could learn from and emulate. So where have these ideas in Shanlian come from? Are they government-driven, or is it just luck of the draw? Well, not really either of these. Mr. Ye, who's been showing me around, is a graduate official. One of 130,000 across China who've been given leadership roles in their villages and are bringing new ideas and innovations to help transform lives.
There's one remaining question though. What to do when the season isn't busy? What to do when the tourists aren't here?
These big questions of dependency on cash crops, of the sustainability of particular industries including tourism, and of quick wins has plagued the development sector for decades. The Chinese answer to this is infrastructure, infrastructure, infrastructure. The latest trend is in improving internet access. Few villages in poor countries have paved roads, let alone the internet, but not here. The government now aims to ensure 4G internet is accessible to more than 98% of its villages by 2020. That's next year. The big idea behind this is not about information, it's about efficiency, linking everything up to the internet. It's called the Internet of Things. Accenture estimates that the Internet of Things could add about $500 billion to China's cumulative GDP by 2030. So even in small villages, the Internet of Things investments are relevant. I've seen examples of what that means in practical terms right here in Shanlian.
So this smart cabin, you don't have a gate, anybody there when you arrive. What you need to do is you just scan this code right here and you open it up. Let's see. Yep. Oh, it's open. Excellent. That's perfect. And here we are going inside. And it's everything you need for a short break here in this stunning village. You've got a TV there, beautiful view.
The Internet of Things has meant that Shanlian can look at new industries it hadn't considered seriously before.
Okay, this is our IoT ear factory. And I can turn on the acquisition machine using my phone. And I can also operate it abroad.
You see, that is an innovation which is also being shown here on the screens, where you can see all the different variables for the eels in this farm, a whole range of factors which affect and make sure that they're run cost effectively.
While the government infrastructure support helps, the specific innovations and decisions in Shanlian have their major source, the village chief, Mr. Wu. He had been a very successful businessman and entrepreneur elsewhere in China and returned to his home village in 2006 to make a contribution to it. He was put into a leadership position immediately. He was actually the one who brought chrysanthemums to the village, testing them for 3 years in his own farm before the rest of the village saw that it could be a viable and lucrative crop to grow. He has welcomed the graduate officials and nurtured their ideas. Again, when I hear this type of story, I can't help but feel this has direct relevance for the poverty reduction work I do in African countries. Countries like Ghana are looking to bring in their diaspora to share ideas and innovation from elsewhere, adapt them and make similar transformations in their home villages and cities. But will they get the leadership positions to be able to drive these transformations? Seeing how China has been able to attract talent back to its rural areas is fascinating.
It's a new busy morning here in Shanlian village. Everyone is out having their breakfast and tea. And I think it's time that I reflected on this trip as well. And I think I've got, oh, hello, hi, thank you. Chrysanthemum tea. I always say if development was easy to deliver, I would have done it by now. Whether it's Jeff Saxonanian villages or Nyerere's Ujamaa villages, rural development has always been notoriously difficult. Here in Shanlian, we see two experiments. One with integrating agriculture into a full supply chain, including tourism, and two with bringing leaders and entrepreneurs back home to contribute to their home economies. Will it be successful? Well, so far, yes. However, is Shanlian going to be able to keep the tourists that it's getting right now as the competition from elsewhere heats up? These are questions for the future that no one knows the answer to right now. In the meantime, countries like Ghana, Rwanda, Kenya, Tanzania are all experimenting with these and other new strategies. I personally think this is a good thing, and I have hope for the future.